Okay, so today I want to talk about my new short film idea. Um, just to let you know a little bit about my background, I usually work on more of a comedy style type film, but in this project, we're actually working on a project that's about, boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, and then boy gets girl back. So um, basically, I was trying to come up with a way to make this kind of my style. So um, I was thinking of what my grandmother used to say. My grandmother used to say all the time. She used to say, "You don't always get what you want." Well, in this instance, it's more like you don't always want what you get. so um, basically, the way my story starts is it's a beautiful day in the park, and my one of my characters, Cindy, is sitting on a park bench reading a book. And as she's sitting there, a man walks up and he asked her, "Is this seat taken?" And she looks up and smiles and says, "No, help yourself." So the man proceeds to sit down, and he leans over and introduces himself. His name's Peter. And she's like, "I'm Cindy." And he's like, "It's a good day to read, huh?" And she was like, "Yeah, it is." Um, so that starts the story. Then Peter reaches in his book bag and gets out a book and he starts to read. And as he's reading, he glances over and notices that Cindy is reading the exact same book that he's reading. So he just kind of goes back over in his book and, just kind of smiles, or whatever. And then Cindy, the same thing happens with Cindy. Cindy glances over and notices that Peter's reading the same book she's reading. The classic romance. So then Peter reaches in his bag and he grabs out a piece of paper and he uses his book as a hard surface to write on. He starts jotting down something. Cindy kind of keeps glancing over to kind of see what's going on, and then um, Peter puts his book back in his bag, and he gets up and he says, "Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day reading." And Cindy doesn't say anything. She just kind of has that grin on her face while she's looking at her book, kind of smitten look or whatever. And so when he walks away, and Cindy looks up and she looks around and notices that he's gone. Well, when she looks over on the bench beside her, there's a note. So Cindy reaches over and grabs the note and she opens it up and it says, "I had a fun time sharing a bench with you today in the park. Um, why don't you come to my place tonight at 8 p.m. and I'll make dinner and we can talk about the book." And then he puts, "I'm making an amazing dinner roll that I know you'll love." So then it shows a close up of Cindy just kind of closing the note and kind of smiling, and then cut scene. Then we go into Peter's kitchen. Okay, so we're in Peter's kitchen, and Peter's actually trying to get prepared, frantically running around. He's constantly checking his watch. What time is it? What time is it? Um, and he's lighting the candles and he's blowing them out and he's lighting them. He don't know if he wants it to be a romantic thing or not. And so he finally gets the dinner plate set, or he finally gets the dinner table set, and he's made, of course, a nice big plate of spaghetti, and of course his famous homemade dinner rolls for his company. So he looks at his watch and he notices it's 8 o'clock and she's still not there. So he sits down and has a sip of wine, and then time just kind of fast forwards towards 8:30. He's still sitting there sipping wine. She's still not there. So Peter gets up and he starts picking up the plates as if to take them and put them up, kind of as in defeat, like he's been defeated and depressed about it. And so right as he's getting ready to put the plates up, the doorbell rings. He runs to the door. He opens up the door, and lo and behold, there's Cindy holding a book in front of her face. And then she moves the book to the side and she's smiling, and Peter smiles back at her, and then that's the end scene. The next scene is actually just going to show them kind of conversing back and forth. There's not going to be any direct wording or anything like that. It's just going to be laughing. You can tell they're having a good time, sipping their wine, eating the food, and all that. So Peter reaches over to grab a dinner roll at the exact same time Cindy reaches over to grab a dinner roll. Peter's hand gets there first, and then Cindy's hand rests on top of Peter's hand, and they notice that there's only one dinner roll left, right? So Cindy and Peter make eye contact, and it's almost like they made that connection, you know, or whatever, that first little connection you get when you meet someone. And so they're sitting there looking at each other, smiling. Well, then the camera, you know, gets a close-up of Cindy, and her smile changes to like a disgusting look. And when it turns back to Peter, he's over stuffing his face with that dinner roll. So he's over stuffing his face with the last dinner roll. So Cindy gets mad and stomps off and leaves the house. So Peter's left sitting there crying, eating, you know, chewing on the last dinner roll, and then cut scene. Time goes by, and the next scene is Cindy's sitting in the park. It's a beautiful day. She's reading a book on a park bench, and she hears a familiar voice. Is the seat taken? And Cindy doesn't even look up. She just kind of changes her whole demeanor, and she's like, ugh, you know, whatever. And so she, you know, is kind of ignoring her surroundings and whatever. So finally, you know, she kind of glances over real quick, and sure enough, Peter's actually sitting beside her reading a book on the park bench. So she turns and looks back at her book, you know, kind of upset or whatever. And she glances down and notices that there's a whole plate of dinner rolls in between them on the seat with a note that says, "I'm sorry." So Cindy looks back at her book, and, you know, a smile starts to form on her face. She reaches down to get a dinner roll, and Peter kind of catches it out of the corner of his eye. So now he's got a smile back on his face, and, you know, she starts eating a dinner roll, whatever. Well, Peter reaches down to get a dinner roll, and Cindy slaps his hand away from the plate. And Peter looks up at her in shock, and Cindy's just sitting there with a smile on her face. So then Peter starts smiling, and so he turns back to his book again, and he reaches down a second time, and she smacks his hand away again. And so Peter looks at her smiling, and when he looks at her smiling, Cindy has this "I'm going to rip your head off" look on her face, like a psychotic, crazy person look. So Peter turns back around in shock, just kind of continuing to read his book or whatever. And at that point, Cindy picks up the dinner rolls and moves them to the side and forcefully scoots over close to him, grabs his arm, and just starts to cuddle with him while she's reading, kind of forcefully, as if to say, you know, she's claiming her prize, with a psychotic look on her face, you know. And so she's sitting there reading, and Peter's sitting there kind of in fear, you know. And so at this point, a stranger comes walking by, and Peter goes, "Help me," like that. He kind of reaches out, "Help me," like that. Well, Cindy hears him, and she raises up, and it shows a close-up of Cindy, and she's got this really weird, crazy look on her face. "What did you say, dear?" And so Peter's like, "Nothing." So he goes back to reading his book, kind of with, you know, scared look on his face, and Cindy, you know, grabs his arm even tighter, and she's sitting there just looking at her book with this crazy psychotic grin on her face, and Peter's just crying. Cut scene. That's the whole story that I came up with. I'm sure there's some other things I might want to add to it in the future, but this is where I am so far, and it kind of fits with what I'm about, and so I'm super excited about it. It has kind of that twist where, like I said, you don't always want what you get, and you don't always get what you want. And this story is called The Last Roll. So that's a working title. We'll see where we go from there. I may say The Last Dinner Roll, but I wanted it to be, you know, kind of The Last Roll. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to putting this story together, and I'm also looking forward to your feedback. Thank you so much. My name is Daly. Have a good day.